I rise to speak to the motion presently before the House, and that is the annual custom observed when we note the budget statements. When the budget statements were tabled in late June, the Parliamentary Secretary said in relation to funding on the prevention of family and domestic violence, "In this budget, we will double down on our efforts, including an additional $11 million to expand Safe at Home, a program that helps women and children experiencing domestic and family violence to stay safely in their homes. This will enable the expansion of 4 existing domestic violence outreach services and establish 3 new sites of assistance, and an additional $1.4 million to progress planning for expansion of FDV shelters in Albany and Geraldton, as well as 5 additional refuges across the state that will significantly boost access to services." Now, this is just one part of the funding that has been allocated in this space. And of course, we wholeheartedly support the expansion of these crisis programs. It's a sad indictment on our society that these are sorely needed and that demand for services continues to increase, as do the rates of family and domestic violence. Before I go further, I want to acknowledge today that I will make references to sexual violence, including rape and to suicide. I recognise that these are deeply distressing subjects for many, and I offer this warning out of respect for any who would be affected. So, starting with a consideration of the scale of the problem. We've recently seen the WA Police crime statistics released for the 2024-25 financial year, and these reveal that, sadly, family and domestic violence continues to rise. Family and domestic violence-related offences now account for 22.8% of all recorded offences. Total family and domestic violence offences are up from 39,132 in the previous year to 45,775. The number of breaches of family violence restraining orders that were investigated by police in the last financial year increased by almost 20% to 20,082. And the number of breaches of family violence restraining orders that were actually found increased almost 20% from 11,259 to 13,462. What's even more troubling is that these figures are underreported. WA Police Commissioner Cole Blanche said, "I have a special advisory group who specifically inform me, who are industry experts in family and domestic violence and survivors themselves, who tell me up to 70% of women are still not reporting to police for various reasons." Crime statistics are rising in other areas too, with recent sexual offences increasing by over 11%, and threatening behaviour has more than doubled since 2021-22. The reality is that whatever we're doing now is not enough, that the frontline supports are not enough, and that prevention measures are essential in the space of family and domestic violence, and also, specifically, in the area of preventing violence against women. The budget papers include ongoing funding commitments to a program called Our Watch. The funding is $129,000 in the out year 2026-27 and to the full out years. Now, the aim of that program is to embed gender equality and prevent violence where Australians live, learn, work and socialise. This program was established under the original National Plan to reduce violence against women and their children, which was from 2010 to 2022. We now have a new National Plan to reduce violence against women and their children for 2022 to 2032. And the vision committed to in that plan is for a country free of gender-based violence, where all people live free from fear and violence and are safe at home, at work, at school, in the community and online. This is a human right for all people, and we commit to ending violence against women and children in Australia in one generation. The national plan, which has been agreed to and adopted by all states, succinctly outlines the distressing extent of the problem. Violence against women and children is a problem of epidemic proportions in Australia. 1 in 3 women has experienced physical violence since the age of 15, and 1 in 5 has experienced sexual violence. On average, a woman is killed by an intimate partner every 10 days. Rates of violence are even higher for certain groups, such as Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women. A woman is also more likely to experience violence at particular life stages, such as while pregnant or while separating from a relationship. In 2021, girls aged 10 to 17 made up 42% of female sexual assault victims. So it's important that we confront the cultural machinery that drives violence, particularly against women and children. And unfortunately, a byproduct of the increase in abundance of the tools that we use online for so many good things, those tools can also enable far more violence against women. So drilling down, after looking at the scale of the problem that we're facing here in Western Australia and across our country, let's consider the impact on individual people of violence against women. Today I want to tell you about Melinda. Over the past 3 weeks, Melinda has been attacked with an avalanche of abuse. Rape threats, death threats, torture threats. She's been sent child sexual abuse material, she's been sent pornography, she's been accused of pedophilia and encouraged to kill herself. There's been threats to make rape porn using her photo, people have made videos up to 4 hours long, spreading lies and misinformation about her. People have threatened to hunt her down. They've called her all number of horrible names. They've described women as sex objects and property. Her social media account and emails have been flooded with hate comments, many from accounts created specifically for abuse. Incredibly abusive memes and deepfakes have been circulated designed to ridicule and publicly humiliate her and discredit her and more. And I'm sorry to say that over the past 3 weeks, it's not just been happening to Melinda. It's also been happening to Coralie, to Caitlin, to Renee, Bernie and Lynn. But why? Why are these specific women being targeted with such horrific abuse? Back in April, there was a small but significant change in the online gaming world. A platform named Steam removed a rape simulation game called No Mercy. This came about because thousands of people emailed the company, tens of thousands, over 70,000 signed a petition calling for its removal. At the time when it was discovered, this group of women also discovered almost 500 other games on that platform depicting rape, incest, sexual torture and child abuse. And these games are openly accessible to anyone, including children. So these women, who are part of a group called Collective Shout, contacted payment processing companies, given that they derive financial benefit from facilitating the sale of these games, and asked them to cease processing payments on gaming platforms which host rape, incest and child sexual abuse themed games. Now, I won't repeat the descriptors of these games. If you're interested in either understanding what is so abhorrent about them in specific detail or understanding some of the threats that have been received by these women, the details are on the Collective Shout website. But through their advocacy work, these brave women and the thousands of people who stood up with them have successfully had hundreds of these games delisted. And it didn't stop there. At the end of July, thousands of games glorifying rape, torture and sexual violence against women and girls were delisted from gaming platform Itch, while it carried out an audit to determine if the games complied with updated terms and conditions of payment process gateways. Now, the backlash against these actions has been massive claims, large petitions claiming that these infringe on the freedom of expression. And Caitlin, who works with Melinda, voiced what so many of us believe when she said, "I don't think men's speech should trump the rights of women and girls. Violence and dehumanisation of women should not be acceptable outcomes of free speech. We also have to consider whose voices are being heard and whose are being silenced. Does free speech apply to women, to survivors of rape and sexual assault? Do we have a right to object to speech that promotes and normalises violence against us?" The irony is that the retaliation that has been poured out really underscores the fact that these types of games encourage such violent behaviour. So while there's been some changes in the online gaming world, a greater cultural shift is required. It's very clear that this sort of behaviour online and the behaviour that's happening out of the online space is unacceptable, but also very difficult to combat in a legal setting. Melinda and the women at Collective Shout are brave to put forward a vision to see a world free of sexploitation where the objectification of women and sexualisation of girls is unthinkable. So today I'm standing with Melinda, I'm standing with Caitlin, Coralie, Lynn, Renee and Bernie and calling it out. I'm backing in the UN Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women and Girls, Ms Reem Al-Salem, who has called for action against this torrent of abuse, specifically saying, "I expect and hope all those that have a mandate to act, be they state institutions or businesses, to put an end to these threats and to the violence." Ms Al-Salem continues to say, "No one has an unlimited right to freedom of expression. If it incites violence, misogyny or hatred against a person or a group, including women and girls, or a group of them, it is prohibited under international law." I pledge that I will do what I can in this place, and that includes calling for greater cultural change and calling for more funding in future budgets. Tackling family and domestic violence in particular, and violence more broadly, is completely a bipartisan goal. And that means that we believe that it's important. We believe the current situation is not good enough and that Western Australians deserve better. But as a member of the opposition, it also means that this issue is so important that I have to raise valid concerns and highlight that things are not working, all as part of trying to make change in this space and to send a message. As well as funding for frontline support services, we should also be considering where we can make changes in legal tools, such as expanding takedown powers and platform accountability to combat digital abuse, deepfake misuse, and AI-enabled misogyny. Now, I do note that the government has introduced a bill into Parliament which will bring in a broader range of offences, particularly in relation to post and boast, which will make it illegal to engage in activity that glorifies or boasts about specific criminal conduct. Some of the offences that are included in that are violent crimes and dangerous driving, inciting hatred. But perhaps it's a missed opportunity to expand it to deal with some of these sexual offences. So we can only hope that the effectiveness of it will be broadened in time. I return now to the motion before the House, which is the motion to note the budget statements. And today I cannot help but reflect on the words of the Parliamentary Secretary in relation to health. When delivering the 9th budget of the Labor government, the specific words are that we invest like never before in our hospitals and health system, increasing capacity and delivering reforms to provide world-class patient care into the future. Now, after the month we've had and the statistics we've seen, that does feel a bit like salt in the wound, with the ambulance ramping clearly gone out of control. Earlier today I gave notice of a motion focusing on how, when the Labor government came into power in March 2017, it promised to improve the performance of the health system when monthly ambulance ramping at that time had never exceeded 2,300 hours, compared to July, where we've had over 7,000 hours. It's also clear that other elements of our health system are in crisis. This budget delivers a $1.4 billion increase in funding to the health system, but what we're dealing with now demonstrates that sometimes clearly can't always just be about the amount that's being spent, but about how effectively and how well it's being spent. Yesterday, the story came in about more than 1,000 work orders were requested between January 2023 and June 2025 at Sir Charles Gardner Hospital. Now, some of the comments in response to this have been quite dismissive, have played down and deflected around the scale of the problem and the veracity of some of the contents provided. But I think it's worth just having a look at some of the comments that have been made in the work orders. Some of those around pipes blocked, leaking into corridors in the sub-basement, potential mould in the walls and roof. Please investigate and resolve the water that has flooded the visitors' room. There is urgent leak in the roof with flooding in the theatre corridor and onto equipment. There's a huge leak, unable to utilise the room for patient testing, with calls for urgent assistance. Now, in addition to the contents of these work orders, which show a systemic problem at Sir Charles Gardner, we also have the words of callers into the radio this morning, a nurse, Leanne. Just recently, we've had an overflow of faecal matter in the ground floor, and while we've got patients waiting in the waiting room, the smell is going through the whole department. We also had, probably 3 years ago, we've had mould with actual mushrooms growing out of our ceilings and in the actual main corridors. Every time there's a huge rainfall downpour in Perth, there's always buckets and towels on the floor. Even our staff toilets are disgusting. The AMA President, Dr. Carl Hoth, has highlighted concerns around unsafe working conditions in our hospitals, the hazards that this presents to the staff and to the patients. Staff have repeatedly warned that expensive lab equipment has been at risk, and it indicates and implies a systemic inability to provide a workplace where that is safe for both workers and for patients. So we must consider whether these signs just in one of our hospitals really indicate a serious issue with our health system more broadly, and help make us query whether the funds that are being pumped into the health system are being spent effectively. As I note, my colleague, the Honourable Dr. Brian Walker, made comments about earlier as well and questioned in some detail. But moving on to another topic and another area of the budget. The government is investing in Western Australia's water supply with a $6.3 billion program of works over the next 4 years. Now, the government's plan to manage our water is of great interest to me, with our background in environment and planning law. And I've done work previously as a lawyer with companies who are applying for water licences or needing to amend their water licences and trying to consider whether their licensing arrangements are sufficient for the purposes of the projects that they're engaging in. So it's critical to assess in the area of water not only what is being funded and by how much, but how effective that funding is. In June this year, the Office of the Auditor-General report on the regulation of water and water licences was released. And the Auditor-General says quite clearly and quite broadly, I think most people would broadly agree with her, that water is a valuable and essential resource critical to our everyday life, agriculture, industry and natural environment. But flowing on and looking at the outcome of the investigation into our water licensing system, it's a concern to me that the Auditor-General has found that poor management, over-extraction and illegal taking of water all threaten the long-term sustainability of our groundwater supplies and create an uneven playing field for operators who are doing the right thing. So let's break it down and look at what this actually means in the context here in Western Australia, what actually indicates why it's such an important area. So our water supply in WA is drawn from three main sources. Those are surface waters such as rivers, dams and reservoirs. We have desalinated or recycled water, and we have groundwater, which comes from the aquifers beneath the Earth's surface. Now, in Western Australia, surface water is relatively scarce. This is because of our climate and our relatively low rainfall. Desalination plants are quite expensive. And I do note that Labor is touting its Made in WA policy when it is talking about investing in a new desalination plant. But the reality is that most of our water in Western Australia, what we predominantly rely upon is groundwater. In fact, 78% of the water that we use comes from groundwater aquifers. This is used for agriculture, mining, irrigation, and also for drinking supplies across our towns and cities. Now, this is significantly higher than in other Australian states, where surface water and regulated water, such as the Murray-Darling Basin, play a much larger role. And I should note that despite a lower reliance on groundwater in other states, some of them have far better systems to regulate groundwater use. This is partly because of an investment they have made in actually understanding how much groundwater there is in their state. That's vastly different from where we are in Western Australia, where there's very little understanding of the extent of our water sources. But we do know that we have a relative over-reliance on groundwater, and that carries some well-documented risks which we should be aware of. These include aquifer depletion, saltwater intrusion, environmental degradation, and economic costs. Now, here in Perth, in particular, most of our water is coming from an aquifer. And the water use in Western Australia across the board is governed by our Rights in Water and Irrigation Act and regs, and it's administered by the Department of Water and Environmental Regulation. Now, under the RIWI Act, a licence is generally required to lawfully take water and to construct or alter wells in WA. This doesn't include for domestic use. And licensing conditions, this is generally where large volumes of water are being taken, may include volume limits, time restrictions, metering and monitoring obligations. About 44% of licences require the licence holders to install and maintain meters and provide evidence of this to the department, along with reports on how much water they have drawn. The Department of Water and Environment Regulation manages at least 12,000 active licences in WA. But the Office of the Auditor-General has repeatedly found that the department lacks the capability to ensure water use is sustainable or compliant. Between 1st of July 2021 and the 30th of June 2024, 16,702 potential incidents of non-compliance were identified. 63% of those were suspected unauthorised extraction of water. 87% of those potential incidents were never assigned to a staff member. And of the remainder that were, 37% of assigned incidents did not have their evaluations completed before the statutory timeframe expired. So the department's current activities provide a limited understanding of the actual compliance and do little to deter licence holders from breaching their conditions. One of the other issues raised by the Office of the Auditor-General is that staff are given little or no formal training in making compliance assessments. What makes it worse is that this is the third report conducted by the Office of the Auditor-General that had found issues with the planning and monitoring of water use in the state in recent years. So in 2009 and 2021 reports were also handed down. The conclusion drawn from the outcome of these investigations is that our environment is not currently adequately protected as our regulators, including in the Department of Water and Environment Regulation, do not have an effective understanding of how well operators follow their conditions. And the ineffective conditions are not well managed. The department's response to the 2023 report into this acknowledged the shortcomings and stated that through its reform roadmap, it was moving towards different systems, planning to integrate monitoring functions and intelligence sharing across divisions, and developing different systems. The strategic plan for the department speaks of developing and implementing new water resource legislation to provide for sustainable water management, and that's the strategic plan from 2022 to 2026. While our water resources continue to become increasingly stretched, the Auditor-General has delivered scathing assessments of water regulation, and the government continues to promise reform, but we haven't seen it. Now, when it comes to the budget and we look at the funding that's been allocated, one of the biggest issues that's been raised in the context of these concerns is that despite a 40% increase in water licensing funding over the past decade, the Office of the Attorney-General has offered no suggestion that underfunding is to blame. Instead, the report has pointed to chronic mismanagement, poor coordination, ineffective enforcement, and no coherent strategy. The result? A system that costs more and delivers less, and still doesn't protect our water resources. There are concerns in terms of the staffing levels. There's not much clarity. There's increase in staffing in the department, but there's still the comments that come from the Auditor-General that staff are given little or no formal training to make compliance assessments, and it's not clear whether additional staff will be allocated to compliance or if they'll get the training that they need. The average cost per licence issued is increasing year on year from $4,182 in 2023 to 2024 to a forecast $5,296 by 2025-26, which suggests that licensing processing is either becoming more complex or the inefficiency is increasing. The government's proposed budget provides no clear or transparent picture on how the water licensing funds are being allocated or spent, and despite increases in funding, there is little evidence that this investment will lead to meaningful change. The Auditor-General has made it quite clear the current system does not work, and it's time that we looked at systems in other states that do. Our groundwater is too vital and too fragile to be governed by a system that is this dysfunctional. The Auditor-General has sounded the alarm 3 times in recent years, and the message is clear. The current system is not fit for purpose. Moving on to other areas of the budget that do also have environmental impacts, I refer to Budget Paper 2, which includes a $217.5 million commitment to the Perth Entertainment and Sporting Precinct. I'll follow on from the comments of my colleague, the Honourable Dr. Brian Walker, who did raise quite specific concerns around community consultation with this project. And I've previously spoken in this place about how the people of WA deserve a responsible government that listens to its citizens and consults with them. And what I'm hearing from people in the community around Burswood is that this is not what they have received. In 2020, after years of genuine community consultation, the government released a long-term vision for Burswood Park, a 20-year master plan. This was built around 3 pillars: nature, public access and community use. That plan provided certainty to people who wanted to live in that area and based their decisions around where they wanted to live on that sort of information. Now in January this year, a $217.5 million V8 supercar racetrack was announced to be built on this site. The community consultation that happened after this announcement has been criticised by locals on many levels, who say that the consultations that they were provided at the drop-in centres didn't ask them whether or not they agreed with adding a racetrack to this beautiful area. It simply asked them gave them some information around it, but it's really been described by the locals that attended those forums as a sham of consultation. Now, let's be clear, in addition to the locals who've objected to this, the local council has also voiced its concerns. In February, at one of their council meetings, they voted 7-1 against this proposal. And minutes from their meeting, held on the 18th of February, outline a motion that Council 1. Does not support the construction of a motorsport street circuit motorplex at Burswood Park because A. It will have negative impacts on the natural environment, including the Swan River and the wetlands, the loss of public open space, tree canopy and wildlife habitat and carbon emissions. B. It will have significant negative impacts on the surrounding residential communities, including noise, odour and light pollution, traffic congestion and loss of amenity. C. It is not included in the Burswood Park Board's 20-year vision for the future entertainment precinct at Burswood Park, which was prepared with community consultation. D. There has been no community consultation with the residents of the town who will be impacted or with the town itself. E. There has been no disclosure of a feasibility study, environmental impact assessment, business case, demonstrating a need for a motorplex in this location or proper costings. And 2. The Council endorses the Burswood Park Board's 20-year vision for the future of Burswood Park, released in 2024, which does not include a motorplex. At the same time, other councils are calling out for funding and investment in this space, such as the City of Wanneroo, who sees this as a potential investment that would align very closely with the projects and the facilities in their area. Petitions have been tabled with thousands of signatures from locals objecting to this project, objecting to this choice of the investment of funds, considering that this is the wrong priorities for our state and that the money could be best served elsewhere. Some of the comments from locals: Lisa has said that the consultancy was a joke. On one of the days when there was a football game on, people were told to move on by police. They weren't allowed to be there. The consultations did not take to communities the impact of the noise pollution, namely it didn't go out to Burswood, Claysbrook, Victoria Park, Belmont and Lath Lane. Dr Robin Harvey's expressed concern around being excluded from decision making. We live directly across the river and the noise impact will be unbearable. We have repeatedly reached out to politicians but have been met with silence. The lack of transparency and unwillingness to answer questions in relation to this project has continued through the estimates process in the other House. There's been a very evasive answers provided around land acquisitions with no discussion that no land will be purchased for the site, but no clarity on whether there would be the possibility of land swaps included or these have all raised concerns around hidden plans and the impact on local stakeholders. There's also been large concerns around lack of a clear noise management plan and lack of mitigation measures being explained to residents, as well as concerns around the environment and traffic. WA taxpayers deserve better. They deserve accountability, they deserve information and consultation, not a $217.5 million project that benefits few and has a negative impact on many. The question is, why is the government prioritising this pet project when that money could be far better used elsewhere, particularly if it's invested in a way like in our health system where the funds are invested but not wasted? Thank you.